Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leese and here are today's top stories. A poll shows half of the nation supports the latest budget, though it's to be the biggest tax burden in 50 years. Education Recovery Commissioner calls for an ambitious plan to help pupils make up for the time they've missed at school. And an Australian think tank says the Chinese Communist Party is running a propaganda campaign to discredit the BBC. Rishi Sunak announced major changes to tax on Wednesday. Earlier, NTD's Jane Worrell spoke with Julian Jessup at the Institute of Economic Affairs about the budget.
The second budget for Chancellor Rishi Sunak against the backdrop of the pandemic. He announced a rise in corporation tax on company profits from 19% to 25% in 2023, just 1% less than the taxes advocated by former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. There'll also be a freeze on income tax thresholds, meaning more people are set to pay it. And he announced measures to protect UK businesses as the economy begins to emerge out of lockdown.
It's a difficult position for any government to be in, but I think particularly uncomfortable for this government because it is a low spend, small state, low tax government.
There are a total of £407 billion spent since COVID-19. What do you make of the budget that was announced on Wednesday?
Well, it was a really important budget and a very difficult balancing act for the Chancellor. On the one hand, he had to provide more emergency support for the economy, so he extended a lot of government schemes that are supporting jobs, protecting businesses and topping up incomes. But at the same time, he's wary about the cost of all of this, so he also announced some quite big tax increases, none coming in straight away, but over the next few years. Individuals are going to pay a lot more in income tax and companies are going to have to pay a lot more in corporation tax. So it's been a difficult judgment to make. On balance, I think he's probably got it right, but only time will tell.
Do you have a feeling of the mood within the Conservative Party and other economists?
I think people appreciate the fact that he hasn't hidden the fact that taxes are going up. I think people also feel happy that the main burden is going to be falling on companies rather than individuals. If the economy doesn't recover quickly, and in particular, if he starts talking about further tax increases, then I think politically he's going to be in a very difficult position, not just with the opposition and the general public, but of course with people within the Conservative Party itself.
How's it going to affect British people? Tell me about the impact.
So in the short term, they'll see the good news. In the longer term, though, they're going to start to feel the bad news. So in a year or two's time, people will start paying more in income tax than they would otherwise have done. And also companies are going to have to start paying more in tax as well. And that increase in corporate tax is likely to be passed on in one way or another to in the form of higher prices or lower wages. So there's some good news now, but some potential pain further down the line.
Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
And just hours after the Chancellor's Wednesday budget announcement, two polls showed a broad welcome from pollsters despite the coming corporate tax rises in 2 years.
Around half the nation support the UK's latest budget. A snap poll by Opinion Research suggested 52% approved with only 12% disapproving. A second poll by YouGov showed 46% in support, 11% opposed and 42% don't know. In the YouGov poll, 49% of pollsters agreed the financial help scheme should end in September, with 16% saying it should end earlier. 69% supported the proposed increase in corporation tax to 25% for businesses with profits over £250,000, only 11% disapproved. It is to be the biggest tax burden since the 1960s.
Once we are on the way to recovery, we will need to begin fixing the public finances. And I want to be honest today about our plans to do that.
Rishi Sunak's budget indicates how the government plans to repair the economy after the pandemic. Sunak said on Wednesday the economy will regain its pre-pandemic size in the middle of 2022.
Pupils are returning to school next week in England, but The Education Recovery SAR says a bold and ambitious plan is needed to help pupils make up for learning losses.
The Education Recovery Commissioner, speaking to MPs on Tuesday, said plans to help pupils make up for the disruption caused by lockdowns need to be part of a comprehensive reform.
I think we have to be bold and ambitious. My view is that the recovery needs to be long-term, sustained and far-reaching. Catch-up isn't really the language I'm using. I think it's much more about recovery over time. Catch-up is part of it.
The government said last month it will provide £300 million for tutoring programmes. This is on top of £1 billion of catch-up funding announced last year. Downing Street expects the disruption will take more than 1 year to make up. The government is considering longer school days in summer schools. Professor Becky Francis told MPs there were only marginal gains in both suggestions.
It's been shown actually that, that there's a tapering of benefit the longer that the school day progresses. It's no coincidence, I think, that we've come to a place with the average school day. There's issues about pupil attention and so forth and what can be required of pupils.
Collins said schools themselves need to be ones deciding how summer schools might be used alongside existing holiday, activity and food programmes.
The notion of a school-led or locally-led recovery is very important to me in the work that I'm doing. So how you align what you're doing in your school or your local community with your HAF programme seems to me we need to trust people on the ground to put these things together rather than decide that from the top.
Pupils can begin returning to school on Monday in England.
The EU is not happy with the UK's unilateral move on the Northern Ireland Protocol. The bloc says extending the grace period for checks on imports is a breach of the UK's divorce deal.
The European Union on Wednesday promised legal action over the UK's decision to extend a grace period for checks on imports to Northern Ireland. The bloc says it's a violation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, part of the divorce deal between the UK and the EU. The EU's finance chief says this raises questions over whether the UK can be trusted in future negotiations. The UK government waived customs paperwork on certain food and agricultural imports from elsewhere in the UK to Northern Ireland from the end of March to October the 1st. It said it was necessary to provide more time for businesses to adapt. The Northern Ireland Protocol is the most contentious part of the UK's divorce deal with the EU. It means Northern Ireland stays within the EU's single market for goods, requiring checks on some items arriving from Britain. Some in Northern Ireland and several leading Brexit supporters want Johnson to scrap it.
A report by an Australian think tank says the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is conducting a coordinated propaganda campaign targeting the BBC.
The Australian Strategic Policy Institute report finds that the CCP state media are creating social media content to spread 3 claims about the BBC. The first claim is that the BBC spreads disinformation and is biased against China. Some footage promoted by China's state media suggests the BBC edits or manipulates footage and makes false claims about Xinjiang and other topics. The second claim is that the BBC's domestic audiences think that it is biased and not to be trusted. Some pro-CCP social media accounts promote a poll published in the UK's Express newspaper and claimed that almost a majority of Britons believe the BBC is biased. The ASBI report notes that the claim about the BBC not being impartial refers to its covering of the UK's domestic affairs. The third claim is that the BBC's reporting on China is instigated by foreign actors and intelligence agencies. A pro-CCP newspaper, the Global Times, accused the BBC of having foreign anti-China forces at work involved in its reports about Xinjiang. The report says the CCP is mobilizing posts and sharing content not just on Chinese social media, but also on Twitter and Facebook. The CCP's diplomatic and state media's mentions of the BBC peaked on February 5th, the day after the CCP's state-owned CGTN's licence in the UK was revoked. On February 11th, Chinese New Year's Day, the Chinese regime banned the BBC from broadcasting in China, which was only available at some hotels, business and residential compounds for foreigners. Twitter and Facebook are also banned in China.
Some areas of the UK have well below average cases of COVID-19. So now an MP of one such area has questions over staying locked down. NTD's Neil Woodrow reports.
7-day rolling average cases of COVID-19 per 100,000 vary widely across the UK, where the average is now below 100. In Peterborough and Leicester, rates are twice as high at 200, while in the Isle of Wight it's around 20.
With COVID rates in Devon now down to just 31 per 100,000, and with all the vulnerable groups due to have been vaccinated by the end of this month, what will be the justification for keeping my constituents locked down and local businesses closed through Easter and beyond because rates somewhere else happen to be higher?
Secretary of State.
We obviously had a tiered system over the autumn. One of the challenges we found was people travelling from a part of the country where rates are higher to those where they are lower. So whilst we don't rule out a localised approach to outbreaks, we are going to move down the roadmap as a nation across England.
Boris Johnson has clearly stated the cautious approach being taken this time to ease restrictions and hope this will be the last lockdown. Epsom is an area of below average positive cases. I asked some locals about Ben Bradshaw's question and whether they go along with it.
No, because that's very divisive. I mean, people can't help where they live. This awful pandemic has hit everybody, so I think we're going to have to all be treated the same way, otherwise it's going to cause a lot of resentment.
Well, he has a point, but the problem is travel between areas, and they will gradually acquire virus and end up where they shouldn't be, so probably Matt Hancock is correct.
The gentleman says we should come through this as one, and as for Boris,
I think, Boris has made a few errors. Who wouldn't do? But I think he's trying to do the right thing, and we need to be patient.
Another hopes this will be the last lockdown.
There's always going to be people who, given an inch, will take a yard, but I hope that everybody learned their lesson over Christmas, really, because that was silly.
Wednesday's figures show confirmed positive test results have decreased by 31.6% compared to the previous 7 days. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
A study finds CCP virus infections continuing to fall in England, but maybe not as quickly as in early February. Limited data even suggests they may be rising again in London.
According to a study by Imperial College London, an estimated 0.5% of people in England had the virus in February, down 1.6% in January. That's a fall of more than 2/3. The study finds the epidemic is shrinking as the reproduction rate was 0.86 at national level in February. But data suggest the infections are rising again in London, the South East and the Midlands. Researchers also identify some at-risk groups. Ethnic minorities had a higher risk of being infected, with Pakistanis 4 times as likely as white people to test positive. Healthcare workers and care home workers had 40 to 50% higher risk of infection compared with other workers. The real-time assessment of community transmission, or REACT-1 Round 9 final report, is based on a random sample of 165,000 people between February 4th and 23rd, compared with previous data.
A cat had a lucky escape at London Euston Station after it was spotted on the roof of a train that was about to speed to Manchester. Facing an extremely dangerous situation, fortunately the misplaced Moggy was spotted half an hour before the high-speed train was meant to set off at 9 p.m. Passengers were switched to another train and 2.5 hours later, the terrified cat was coaxed down to safety. Catastrophe avoided. Amazon, the world's largest online retailer, opens a physical store in London, and it's a bit different from the supermarkets we're used to.
Amazon's first offline store outside the United States opened on Thursday in the London borough of Ealing. Customers need to scan a smartphone app to open the entry gates. Inside the store, there are no tills or cashiers. Ceiling cameras and shelf weight sensors can automatically determine what shoppers pick up or put back. When they leave the store, their credit cards will be automatically billed. Amazon has already opened dozens of grocery stores in the United States. The opening of the new London shop shows it now wants to sell food globally.
Coming up, the US government announces its foreign policy agenda. So what are its 8 priorities? Find out more after the break. Italy will give a single vaccine dose to those previously infected with the CCP virus, similar to France and Spain.
The Italian Health Ministry's recommendation for a single COVID-19 vaccine dose applies to people who had the virus between 3 and 6 months previously. The move may help save vaccine shots during a time when EU countries are struggling to get enough supplies. Previously infected people may also not need a second dose due to already having some immunity to the virus.
Many of my healthcare professionals, general practitioners who have contracted COVID and who were not vaccinated, have proven to have a very high antibody rate.
At a hospital in Rome, people aged over 80 receive a dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as the country continues its vaccination campaign.
I wasn't inclined to do it because of my age, you understand. Now I've done it. I was scared that something could go wrong.
Italy, with a population of around 60 million, has delivered nearly 5 million doses of vaccines, with 1.5 million people getting the recommended 2 shots.
A French government study suggests that only half of the country's home care workers want to be vaccinated against the virus. Some say it's less about doubting the vaccine and more about doubting the government.
There's a very large number of frontline workers in care homes in France who are refusing to be vaccinated against coronavirus. The number could be as high as almost half of them, according to the government, and it's raising concern that nurses and other workers could be passing the disease on to those in their care. Marie-France Boudret is one of them. She's a nurse at a home for the elderly. She's personally watched a patient suffocate and die in front of her because of the pandemic, but when she was offered to receive a vaccination, she declined.
I hear some vaccines are only for people of a certain age group, others for people of another age group. Then I think, logically, a vaccine is normally for everybody, not just for a certain age group. I thought it was quite strange, quite mysterious.
The skepticism isn't shared by care home residents themselves, where only 20% haven't been inoculated yet. The skepticism's also more nuanced than a general distrust of vaccines. Boudret and others Reuters spoke with say they've been scarred by what they perceive as a lack of support for frontline workers, underpay, and other working conditions. They blame the national government for much of it. Malika Balarbi is with a union representing health workers.
It's not that we want to say we don't want to get the vaccine, we don't want to protect ourselves or the residents. It's just that we've completely lost trust.
The number of workers refusing the vaccine has halved since December, the government says, although the phenomenon isn't limited to France. Similar polls in Germany and Switzerland have seen high numbers as well. Public health agencies and vaccine developers around the world have repeatedly said that they are not cutting corners during the rollout, and that the unprecedented speed of development has been fostered by the unprecedented urgency of a global disaster. and unprecedented resources pouring in to stop it.
An elderly man in Hong Kong died 2 days after he received a Chinese-made CCP virus vaccine. The Hong Kong government reported this on Tuesday.
The Hong Kong government started vaccination for priority groups, including people over 60, since last Friday. According to local media Apple Daily, the 63-year-old man had diabetes and received Chinese-made Sinovac vaccine on the first day. He then developed acute breathing difficulties and died 2 days later. According to media reports, Sinovac vaccine is 50% effective, and suspected side effects are reported worldwide, including death. Hong Kong health officials issued a statement saying the man's death is still under investigation. They said, quote, "At the moment, the causal relationship with the vaccination could not be ascertained."
A judge in Virginia rules that Harry Dunn's family can make a civil claim in the United States. It's against the British teenager's alleged killer, Anne Sekulas, and her husband, Jonathan. 19-year-old Dunn was killed in a traffic accident involving Sekulas near RAF Crawton in Northamptonshire in August 2019. She was driving on the wrong side of the road. Sekulas then claimed diplomatic immunity and returned to the United States with her family. The UK later charged her with causing death by dangerous driving, but an extradition request was refused. US President Joe Biden's administration announces its foreign policy agenda. Biden's Secretary of State has 8 priorities and singled out Communist China. NTD's Alison Lee has the latest.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken lists the Biden administration's foreign policy priorities. These are stopping the CCP virus, addressing the economic recession, promoting democracy abroad, creating a new immigration system, engaging with other countries, combating climate change, maintaining America's technological edge, and dealing with Communist China.
So here's our plan. First, we will stop COVID-19 and strengthen global health security.
Blinken singles out Communist China. He says the U.S.-China relationship is the biggest geopolitical test of the century. While Russia and Iran also pose challenges, Blinken says the communist regime is different.
China is the only country with the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to seriously challenge the stable and open international system, all the rules, values, and relationships that make the world work the way we want it to.
So what will the Biden administration do to address these challenges? Blinken says U.S.-China relations can be competitive, collaborative, and adversarial all at once.
Our relationship with China will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be. The common denominator is the need to engage China from a position of strength.
On the issue of creating a more effective immigration system, Blinken's remarks have surprising resemblance with Trump's policies.
Strong borders are fundamental to our national security, and laws are the bedrock of our democracy.
Blinken wants to work with Central American countries to address the root cause of the migrant crisis. During the past 4 years, the Trump administration has forged cooperation agreements with Central American countries and stepped up engagement with Mexico to formulate the Remain in Mexico policy. Reporting by Alison Lee, NTD News.
Now staying in the U.S. after Texas announced it's reopening, one Texas deli owner says he welcomes the move, but he's keeping some virus-related safety measures by choice.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott says it's time to restore normalcy and livelihoods for Texans. He says deaths and hospitalizations are down, and a number of indicators are heading in the right direction. He says 7 million Texans will have the vaccine by the end of the week, including half of the state's seniors. Texas is one of a growing number of states loosening restrictions as virus numbers drop. But CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says we are not even close to being ready to relax safeguards. She claims the gains are stalling at 70,000 cases and 2,000 deaths per day. In a press conference on Monday, she announced that at this level of cases, with variants spreading, we stand to completely lose the hard-earned ground we have gained. A Texas deli owner says he's glad business can open, but some of his customers like the safety measures.
that love what we're doing over here. We have all of our tables spread apart at a certain distance, which makes them feel comfortable.
Governor Abbott says he understands COVID is still a threat, but that Texans know the tools to protect themselves. The deli owner says he's going to keep the rules voluntarily.
I'm going to continue doing all of the safety precautions that we did.
In his announcement, Abbott said, "With this executive order, we are ensuring that all businesses and families in Texas have the freedom to determine their own destiny."
If you've got a little one, you'll know that it's World Book Day. You might want to get your hands on a Dr. Seuss book, just like Boris Johnson did. The Prime Minister says on World Book Day, and with schools returning in England, there's never been a better time to pick up a good book and get reading. Dr. Seuss favourites like Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham soared to the top of Amazon's bestsellers list this week. It's after it was announced that 6 Dr. Seuss books would no longer be published. They were banned by Dr. Seuss Enterprises due to allegedly racist imagery and faced a backlash by Americans who view the move as the latest form of cancel culture. The recent surge in sales shows the books remain as popular as ever. That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Leith.